December 1914, 5 months into the First World War, the killing stopped. Along the frozen scars of the Western Front, the British Empire and the German Reich, two superpowers locked in a war of annihilation, simply ceased fire. They were not surrendering. They were meeting the enemy. British and German soldiers shook hands, exchanged cigarettes, buried their dead together, and sang the same Christmas songs across the battlefield. For one night, the First World War simply stopped. Not because governments ordered peace, but because the men fighting it briefly refused to continue. The Christmas Truce was not planned by generals, negotiated by diplomats, or sanctioned by governments. It emerged from below, along sections of the Western Front stretching through Belgium and northern France. In a war that had already calcified into mud, barbed wire, and artillery barrages, something briefly broke the logic. By late 1914, the war had stalled. The rapid maneuvers predicted in August had collapsed into trench lines. Soldiers lived in flooded earthworks, surrounded by corpses, rafts, and constant shell fire. Casualty rates were already staggering. Yet the front lines were often separated by only a few dozen meters. Men could hear each other cough. They could smell each other's cooking. They knew the enemy was not abstract. He was close. On Christmas Eve, German troops in some sectors began placing candles on parapets and singing carols. Stille Nacht carried across no man's land. British soldiers recognized the melody. Some responded with their own songs. The sound did not stop the war. It exposed its artificiality. The following morning, men began to emerge cautiously. Hands were raised, rifles were lowered, meetings followed. Gifts were exchanged, cigarettes, chocolate, buttons, bits of uniform insignia. In several areas, joint burial parties retrieved bodies that had lain between the lines for weeks. The truce expanded horizontally, unit by unit, without formal coordination. The paradox is not that soldiers desired peace. It is that they created it temporarily within a system designed to prevent it. Modern industrial war depends on distance, physical, emotional, bureaucratic. It functions when soldiers perceive the enemy as target, not individual. The trench system inadvertently reduced that distance. When opponents could see faces and hear voices daily, total abstraction became difficult to maintain. Shared misery replaced propaganda. But the truce was fragile. It could only exist where officers tolerated it or could not immediately suppress it. In sectors where artillery units maintained pressure, fraternization did not occur. The ceasefires were uneven, improvised, and temporary. They revealed a limit, not a transformation. Importantly, the truce did not spread upward. High command on both sides reacted with alarm. Orders were issued forbidding further fraternization. Units were rotated out. Artillery bombardments resumed. By 1915, the war had adapted. New tactics, poison gas, coordinated barrages, deeper trench systems restored distance. The space for spontaneous humanity narrowed. The soldiers themselves understood the truce was exceptional. Many accounts describe the experience as surreal, even disorienting. After exchanging gifts and shaking hands, men returned to their positions and resumed firing days later. The war structure remained intact. Individual sentiment could not override national mobilization, supply chains, and strategic objectives. What the Christmas Truce exposes is not hidden kindness, but structural tension. The machinery of modern war requires obedience at scale. Yet obedience weakens when proximity reveals similarity. For a brief moment, shared ritual, Christmas, overrode military logic. But ritual could not compete with production schedules and command hierarchies indefinitely. The truce did not end the war because the war was no longer controlled by those in the trenches alone. Industrial conflict had moved beyond personal grievance. It was sustained by factories, railways, and political commitments already too costly to abandon. Even if frontline soldiers had refused to fight, replacement troops could have been sent. The system had depth. That is why the truce remains unsettling. It demonstrates that hostility was not inevitable at the human level. Yet it also demonstrates that individual recognition does not dismantle large systems once they are in motion. For one winter morning, the war paused because the men closest to its violence withdrew consent. Days later, many of those same men fired rifles again at the people they had just shared cigarettes with. The system required it. The factories still produced shells, the railways still moved reinforcements, and the commands still arrived from headquarters. The Christmas truce revealed something unsettling. The soldiers did not need hatred to continue fighting. The machinery of war was already powerful enough to operate without it. The Christmas truce was not a turning point. It was a brief exposure of the gap between human instinct and institutional momentum. A reminder that even in total war, the machinery depends on distance, and distance can fail, but only briefly.